Welcome back, friends, to another weekly video. Last week we talked about growth. We recognized that growth exists and it's this phenomenon that's out there that's important to business. So this week we're going to continue our discussion about growth, and a great place to start our exploration is to start by discussing the controversy over growth. We know that growth is out there. And so what I'm going to start doing in these videos is we're going to start defining key characteristics of growth. Because if we can define growth, we can better understand it. Growth is the area I focus on in my own research. And if you want to know more, if you're curious, I've actually written a book that's a summary of my research called On Wolves in Finance, which you can order on Amazon. I put the link to my website, wolvesinfinance.com, in the description box down below. I promised you a controversy, and you're going to get one. Because we're going to define one of the key characteristics of growth, and it's pretty controversial. Growth continues forever. This might seem like a very bold statement, and some people out there might say, yeah, that can't be right. Nothing continues forever. But this is actually one of the key characteristics of growth. Growth continues forever. Now you have to understand, this is not just an opinion of mine. This is not just some crazy theory I came up with. This is the assumption the entire business world is based on. So if you go and you look at the math equations, if you go and you look at the academic papers, if you look at the stock valuations from the last 50 years, they're all based on this assumption. So they assume that the global economy will grow by a certain percentage point year after year after year forever. That is the assumption the entire global financial system is based on. And so you need to realize that and understand the implications. Let's explain where this assumption comes from. So last week we talked about growth. And when you look at the story of human history, it's this long-term story of continuous growth, back from caveman days up until today where we have smartphones. So if you were going to describe this story of continuous growth, it has to have this continuous element to it. So when we evaluate where we're at today, it's a pretty logical assumption to say that technology will continue to get better in the future. And so if we look at history, we started out as cavemen, here we are today with smartphones, and in the future we'll have even better technology. So we capture this continuous element with the assumption that growth continues forever. The job of finance professionals is to help us decide how to best use our money today. And so what they do is they create these mathematical models that help us understand what's going to happen in the future. And so we can look at our money today and we can decide, you know what, I'm going to take a portion of my money and put it into investments because I think that technology will be better off a year from now. All those mathematical models are based on the assumption that growth continues forever. And that makes sense based on what we know about the world around us. The funny thing about all of this is that no one talks about it. So if you're in college right now, I am betting your finance professor has never told you about this assumption. And the reason no one talks about it is because it is controversial. And I'm going to explain why. Now this is going to get into theoretical physics, so just bear with me here because I do have a point. If you were to walk up to a scientist and ask them the question whether it makes sense to have a process that continues to grow forever, that scientist would probably laugh in your face. And the reason for this is one of the central ideas of science is Newton's third law of motion. This says that every action will have an equal and opposite reaction. You probably have all heard of this. It basically means that energy cannot be created or destroyed. And so it doesn't make sense that you would have a process that continues to grow forever because that implies you have to continually add energy to that process. And there's not enough energy in the entire universe to keep doing that forever. Instead, scientists like to describe things as cycles. So for instance, the Earth revolves around the sun. We have 4 seasons that start over again every year. You have the life cycle that starts at birth and ends in death. And when you talk about motion, when you throw something up into the air, it comes back down because of gravity. So if you said something like you were going to throw something up into the air and it would continue forever and accelerate, that would be silly. This is why physicists love the Big Bang Theory. So the Big Bang Theory says the universe was created in a giant explosion that rapidly expanded, and the universe is still expanding today. But at some point, as the theory goes, billions and billions of years from now, the universe is going to start contracting, and it will contract back to the original point where it will destroy itself. So the universe is one giant cycle where energy is neither created or destroyed. So whether or not you believe the Big Bang Theory is true is not really important here. What is important is that today we have to make decisions on what to do with our money. And so we don't have time to wait around for billions of years to figure out whether these scientists are right or not. This brings us to the great dilemma. Because clearly we have this phenomenon that continues on forever, but at the same time, science tells us we should not have a phenomenon that continues forever. So on our university campuses, we have two different schools. We have our School of Science and our School of Business. And both of these institutions are based on fundamentally different ideas on how the world around us works. One is based on the idea that growth exists, and one is based on the idea that growth does not exist. That is the controversy of growth. Now personally, I don't think that anyone's wrong here. This is not a matter of business is right or science is right. I think we're just at a moment in time when no one has really verbalized how to reconcile these two different approaches. It's not impossible to explain how both things can be true. There's just not a consensus in the academic world on how to explain the discrepancy. I mean, these ideas aren't foreign to science. Just look at the process of evolution. So this is a scientific process of continuous growth that continues forever. It's continued over millions of years and will keep continuing into the future. So in later videos, I'm going to talk more on how to reconcile these differences, but for right now, I just want you to realize that this controversy exists. Here's why it matters. The reason finance professors don't talk about this assumption is because they know it's controversial. And the fact that the entire global financial system is based on a shaky assumption opens the entire system up to criticism. So critics of the financial system can then say, it doesn't make sense that growth would continue forever. The entire global financial system is a sham. It's going to break down. We're going to have global financial collapse. We're going to turn back into cavemen. So everyone better start building their bomb shelters and preparing for the apocalypse. In this world we live in today, where there's so much uncertainty, we have all these questions. What's going to happen to the economy? What's going to happen with our jobs? With all this uncertainty, how do you make decisions with your life? When you understand growth, it makes it easier to answer these questions and address these criticisms. And that is why I'm addressing this issue head on, because growth does continue forever. I can sit here today and tell you with certainty that the future of humanity looks bright, because all you have to do is look at human history. We are on a shooting star upwards of growth. And that makes the argument about the collapse of the global financial system a little bit silly. I mean, we're not going to turn back into cavemen. That's not how life works. That's not how nature works. Let me explain how all of this affects you. So I've been telling you over the last 10 minutes about how there's this area of business that's not fully understood yet, and it deals with the concept of growth. This unclear area is baked into the financial equations that underlie the entire financial system. So if you can come up with a mathematical equation that better represents the characteristics of growth, you can beat the investment banks. Not only that, if you're making decisions in your business, you can beat the competition. Not only that, as a society, we could make better economic choices and avoid things like giant recessions. Isn't it funny that after all our advancements in humanity, that we still have massive recessions that completely take everybody by surprise? Well, I suggest that the reason that happens is because maybe we don't fully understand growth. So we covered a lot in this video, but I wanted to bring it back to the two main ideas that are some of the foundations of finance. Number one, that growth exists, and number two, that growth continues forever. Now I want to hear from you. I know I made some bold statements in this video, so let me know if you disagree with me or if some of this stuff makes sense. Go ahead and leave a comment down below. And if you like this video, if you found it helpful, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. The best way to supercharge a business is through accounting and corporate finance, and I release a new video every week, so come back and check out next week's video.